All right. So how do we do it? How do we live on land outside of water, maintain water levels in the body that are adequate to support our cells, but also get rid of the nitrogenous wastes that are produced by the millions of trillions of chemical reactions that are going on in our body? Well, our kidneys are the organs that do most of that work. And then the filtering structure within the kidney is called the nephron. So the nephrons are like the Brita filters of the body. What they can do is filter out the waste, make sure we keep the materials we need, and then produce a relatively safe urine. Okay, so kidneys are what filter our blood. We've got trillions of cells that produce nitrogenous waste. They dump those waste products into our blood, which makes our blood toxic. And then the kidneys filter all 5 liters of blood every couple of minutes. So the nephron, again, is the structure within the filter, or the filtering structure within the kidney, I should say. And what it does is it controls the movement of solutes and therefore water. And along the way, proteins are going to matter. So if we look at the general structure here, the nephron is the golden structure, and it connects intimately to the blood supply. So sort of keep that image in mind where you see the blood vessels wrapped around the parts of that sort of like trombone-looking nephron. All right, so looking first at the anatomy of the nephron, how it's built. The connection to the blood supply is this knot of blood vessels called a glomerulus. Now, the glomerulus is this twisted knot of blood vessels. And what I'd like you to do is consider what happens to the speed of blood flow through the glomerulus. Because it's all twisted up like that, blood is going to slow down its flow. Think of like a parking garage after some big event. If everyone's leaving at the same time, you have all these cars trying to move their way through the parking garage, it's going to snarl traffic and really slow things down. Well, in a glomerulus, if you have that knot of blood vessels, what will happen is the flow of blood decreases substantially, and that increases the pressure in the glomerulus. Well, if the pressure increases, that's when the fluid gets pushed out the glomerulus. Remember, glomerulus is tissue. Tissue is made of cells, and cells are held together by the hydrophobic interactions of phospholipids. So it's a loose connection that holds membranes together. So if the pressure gets too big, then materials get pushed out of the glomerulus. That process is called filtration. So the pressure builds, contents get pumped out, and what happens is you lose a lot of materials out of your blood. Well, luckily, we have a membrane there. It's called the glomerulus. The glomerulus is like a little balloon that wraps around the Bowman's capsule is the structure that wraps around the glomerulus and captures all that filtrate. Now that leads to what's called the proximal tubule. Proximal is closer to the glomerulus. Then there is this long loop of Henle. It's my favorite part of the nephron. Then you have this distal tubule, and then traveling down that is a collecting duct. So there we see the collecting duct there. So this is sort of a maze or a pathway for all the stuff that gets pushed out of your blood. Now, I've not found any illustrations that adequately illustrate this, but so I tried to do is draw in purple here. All along the way are pumps and channels. So there are protein-based pumps and channels along all these tubes that reabsorb the stuff we need back and secrete stuff we have to get rid of. So now let's look at the physiology of this, the function of it. So in red, that's your glomerulus, right? That's that knot of blood vessels. Again, the pressure builds, and that increased blood pressure forces materials out of the glomerulus that's captured by the Bowman's capsule. Again, that stuff that gets pushed out is called filtrate. Now let's look at what's contained within filtrate. You have water, ions, urea, that's a type of nitrogenous waste, but you also have glucose, amino acids, and drugs and other stuff, okay? So all sorts of stuff sort of almost indiscriminately gets pushed out. What doesn't get pushed out is stuff that's too big. Things that are big, like red blood cells, white blood cells, proteins, things like that, that should stay in your blood, okay? So everything that's small enough gets pushed out, even if it's charged because the pressure is so great. But really big stuff like proteins that are dissolved in the blood and cells like red blood cells and white blood cells, they stay in your bloodstream. So this filtrate, it's gotten rid of some stuff we have to get rid of, right? Some excess ions, urea, other wastes or drugs. But you also lost some stuff we need back, right? You lose water, you lose glucose, and you lose amino acids and other small things that are dissolved in the blood. So, along the path with the proximal tubule, the loop of Henle, and the distal tubule and the collecting duct, all along this path are pumps and channels that can move these solutes. Okay, so what we see here are these arrows showing how we can reabsorb some of the stuff we need. If you draw back salts, then water follows the solute, so you take back some water. Nutrients like amino acids and glucose, you can reabsorb those back into your bloodstream. If we bump a couple slides back, you see how the blood vessels are wrapped around the parts of the nephron here. In reality, when these arrows are shown, what that does is means it's going back into your bloodstream. So we're reabsorbing some of what we needed. Now, in the glomerulus, did everything that needed to be secreted from the cell get pushed out? No. So you can have some nitrogenous waste, some excess protons, stuff like that, also be secreted into your bloodstream. So go back to this. So you have the blood flow in, you have stuff pushed out into filtrate, but then you have the blood flow continue. So some of the stuff that didn't get pushed out originally can still be secreted. So there are pumps and channels along the way that secrete some of these waste products into the filtrate. All right, along the path, along this loop of Henle, there are aquaporins that absorb water, and then other pumps that pump back salts. So along this loop of Henle, you basically reabsorb salts, and that draws water back into your bloodstream. You do the same thing in the collecting duct. You draw water back in. If you didn't have this loop of Henle and the collecting duct here, you'd have to drink at least a couple hundred liters of water a day. Now, right now, you probably drink about 2 liters of water a day, but you need to produce at least, to get rid of all the nitrogenous waste, you'd have to consume a couple hundred liters of water a day. So it would be tremendous. So again, your ability to be out of water is due in large part to this loop of Henle, and then it's helped by the collecting duct. So I think that's really cool that something like that exists, just to draw water back into the body so that we don't produce too much urine. I mean, you still make a couple liters a day, so that's a decent amount of urine, but it is nothing compared to what we would produce if we didn't have that loop of Henle to draw that salt and therefore water back into the body. Along the path here on the distal tubule, again, you have more pumps and channels. You can secrete stuff you don't want, excess ions, and then you can consume or reabsorb, again, back in some of what you need. One thing to think about, if you have foods that are really acidic or drinks that are really acidic, you're going to have excess protons in your blood, right? Well, what can happen is your kidneys can secrete those excess protons. So sometimes if people have a urinary tract infection or a UTI, doctors may recommend you drink like cranberry juice. Well, why drink cranberry juice? Well, it's because cranberry juice is really acidic. So if you drink cranberry juice and you absorb all that acid, if you absorb all those protons into your blood's going to begin to acidify. So when your blood passes to your kidneys, you can pump out those excess protons. And then what that does is it makes your urine acidic. So if your urine becomes more acidic, then it will kill the bacteria that are infecting your urinary tract. So, consuming acidic drinks like cranberry juice can help fight UTIs. So again, the thing to recognize all along the path here are pumps and channels. You reabsorb back into your bloodstream what you need. You secrete what you don't need. Should you ever see like cells, like white blood cells, red blood cells in your urine? No, because typically that stuff doesn't pass into your filtrate because it's too big to escape the glomerulus. Okay, I think that hits a lot of the big stuff. So things to remember. Water follows the solute. Wherever the solute concentration is higher, water potential is lower, and water flows from high to low potential. So if you can just remember water follows the solute, then that helps out quite a bit. A natural process of chemical reactions is the breakdowns of proteins and nucleic acids. And so that will produce nitrogenous waste like the urea that we have in our body. So you got to get it out. So we have things like nephrons in our kidneys that can secrete stuff we don't need, but then reabsorb back the things we do need, like certain ions and nutrients in water. So pumps and channels are really important to the functioning of nephrons. And doing this, again, allows us to be osmoregulators where we can live on land. So I hope you enjoy your time and have a good weekend, and hope you can appreciate your chance to osmoregulate.